All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup, and thank you so much for being patient as we sorted out a few technical difficulties. We're going to have authors coming in and out here as we figure some of that stuff out. So thank you so much for your grace. My name is Lily Dite. I'm on the publicity team over here at Soho Press, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you to the lineup. We've got a really wonderful lineup for you today. And if this is your first time visiting us over here, this is a space where we partner with Mystery to Me Bookstore, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin, to give our Soho crime authors a platform to chat about their new books alongside other Soho crime authors. And it's always a really great time. So thank you so much for being here. I've got a small little spiel I'm going to give you, and then we will get on to our conversation for the afternoon. Our next event will be on March 5th at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to feature William Boyle and translator Nicholas Glastonbury as they talk about their new thrillers that are in close quarters. And you can register for that event now if you'd like to by visiting sohocrimelineup.com. And today we are celebrating the latest releases by co-authors S.J. Rozan and John Shen Ni called The Railway Conspiracy, which comes out on April 1st, and by Leonie Swann, which is called Big Bad Wool, and it comes out on May 6th. Both books are obviously not available for sale yet, but you can pre-order them with this green button down here at the bottom. And we have special signed book plates for these books as well. So if you do want to go ahead and purchase a book, we really love that you're doing it through Mystery to Me because they support our series here and they're just a really great community bookstore. A few more things. We always do some special little door prizes here with the lineup. So just by entering, by RSVPing and attending live, you're entered to win one. Make sure you stay till the end to find out who has won a Mystery to Me gift card. And if at any point you have a question for any of the authors or all of them, you can put that in this chat bubble on your right side of your screen with the little question mark. That's the Q&A box, and then you'll get as many of those as you can. Esther, are you with us?
I am. Can you?
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
What happened? It threw me out. It didn't like.
Wonderful. Snaps for Elizabeth at Mystery to Me, who is the savior of these lineup events. So now that SJ is with us, I'm going to introduce the authors that are joining us, and then we are going to get off on our conversation. Leonie Swann grew up near Munich and earned degrees in philosophy, communications, and psychology from Munich University and the Munich School of Philosophy. Her debut novel, Three Bags Full, became an instant hit, leading the German bestseller charts for months. It has since been translated into 26 languages, won both the PETA Award and the prestigious Glauser Prize for crime fiction in the debut category, and will soon be a major motion picture. She has now published 6 books, including The Sunset Years of Agnes Sharp, and lives and works in the English countryside near Cambridge. Thanks, Leonie, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. It's all true, more or less.
I was going to say, Leonie loves when I read her bio. John Shen Ni is a half Chinese, half Scottish American media executive, producer, and entrepreneur who was born in Knoxville, grew up in San Diego, and is now based in Los Angeles with a penchant for very long run-on sentences. He has served as president of Wildstorm Productions, senior vice president of DC Comics, publisher of Marvel Comics, CEO of Cryptozoic Entertainment, and co-founder of CCG Labs. Thank you, John, for joining us. And S.J. Rozan is the author of 20 novels and over 80 short stories, and editor of 3 anthologies. She has won multiple awards, including the Edgar, Seamus, Anthony, Nero, Macavity, Japanese Maltese Falcon, and the Private Eye Writers of America Lifetime Achievement Award. She's served on the national boards of Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime, and as president of Private Eye Writers of America. SJ has taught at such diverse places as the Art Workshop International in Assisi, Italy, Singapore Management University in Singapore, the Atlantic Center for the Arts in Florida, and the Novel in Progress Book Camp in Wisconsin. She was born in the Bronx and lives in Manhattan. Thank you, SJ, for joining us. Thank you all. You're all veterans of the lineup. So thank you so much for being here again to talk about your second in series books, which we're going to talk about to start the conversation. We celebrated your first in series last year, SJ and John, with The Murder of Mr. Ma. And Leonie, we are republishing your first in series, the Three Bags Full, this year.
Yes.
So could you each tell us a little bit about your first in series books and then where our audiences will find you in your second book without giving too much away?
Well, SJ and I are like Penn and Teller, and I'm like the little guy. So, SJ, please go ahead.
That's the way it works. Our series follows two Chinese detectives in London in 1924. One of them is Judge D, who, if you know anything about Judge D, you'll remember he was from the Tang Dynasty, which is about 1,000 years before that. But we thought he'd enjoy, being in London for a while. And people are always moving Sherlock Holmes around. And since Sherlock Holmes is the Judge D of English literature, we thought we would move Judge D also. He teams up with Lao She, who was an actual Chinese writer who was actually in London in 1924, teaching at the university. And they find themselves embroiled in a case that involves the murder of Chinese men from the Chinese Labor Corps in France in World War I. And so that's the first book in the series, and then the others go on from there. The second one, you want me to talk about the second one now? Was that part of the question? The second one is the Railway Conspiracy, and it has them, it's a couple months later, and it has them in London looking first for a lost piece of Chinese art, and soon gets them tied up in a case that has political ramifications. And of course, they have a group of people with whom they work, and that group gets added to in the second book, and will those people then will carry through the rest of the books, which will each take place a couple months later, or maybe occasionally a couple of years later. And that's the series will just go on and on. That's the plan.
Well, I was extremely pleased to meet Spring-Heeled Jack, because I've been researching him for a different project a while ago, and I guess it's great stuff. And yeah, I was really charmed to see him incorporated. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was that he will be back a couple more times. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I didn't start out to write a series. I didn't even set out to write a book. I mean, this was my very Three Bags Full, my debut novel. Didn't even start as a novel. I thought I'd do a little short story, just a thought experiment. What would happen if you had sheep as protagonists, and what would happen if they tried to solve the murder of their shepherd? And I thought, okay, shepherd's dead, sheep are investigating. 3 pages later, hopefully they have found the killer and problem solved. Now I have a little like experiment on my pages. However, I just kept writing and writing. The sheep didn't get any closer to the actual killer, and at some point it just got fatter and fatter and started looking more and more like a book. That at some point I had to admit that it, yeah, very much seemed to be a book. And as that looking into publishing it at that point, there was no thought of a series. I was just thrilled to get it published at all. And it was so successful, and obviously people say, can we have another one? So I'll do it again. And I found it quite daunting to start with, because this was my very first book, and I didn't know how many books there were inside me, so to speak. And I found Big Bad Wolf probably the most stressful book I've ever worked on, just because now I think I'm working on my 8th book now, so I've done it a few times, and I know that it kind of works. I still don't understand how it works, but it does work. Usually, I sit down long enough, at the end, the outcome will be a book. And at that point, I didn't know that, and I just sort of felt completely, I don't know, trying to not repeat myself while doing the same thing. That is a big trick I find. If you've got a series, people want the same thing again, but they don't want exactly the same thing, and they want something that feels like the same, but it's actually different. And I think that's actually quite difficult balance to strike. And yeah, at the time I found it extremely stressful. But I enjoyed working with the sheep characters again, because you develop them and they're close to your heart, so that was a pleasure. But yeah, it wasn't my most chilled writing experience ever. Definitely not.
And I couldn't tell that as I read it. It seemed
good.
and that experience of knowing now that you're 8 books in that it somehow works. That is very familiar to me, because I'm 20 books in and I still don't know how it works, and I still get stuck in the middle every time.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, but you've done this before.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly my feeling. So I have no idea, but it's going to be okay in the end somehow.
Yeah, somehow, right.
Yeah.
I also am very impressed at the way you have managed to take a flock of sheep, which is a metaphor for groupthink and sameness, and make the sheep so different. And I confess to occasionally glancing ahead as I was reading to make sure that this sheep or that sheep was okay by the end.
All right. Yes.
I didn't want.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I won't say no spoilers, but I think most sheep should be fine at the moment. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. You hear that, folks? No, it's a wonderful.
Yes, I have to say this. The fact that it's sort of been reissued now really gave me a chance to kind of rediscover it again. And also, obviously, it's all happened. It was okay in the end. So the whole stress has been taken out of it. And it really gave me an opportunity to actually enjoy the book and read it again. I think, actually, it's not that bad. So you can read this. This is not terrible. And that it was a really good experience to revisit in a more relaxed frame of mind.
Well, you both brought up characters and like returning characters and the way that you're able to kind of expound on characters. And we would, of course, be remiss to have Leonie in an event and not talk about the animal perspective that she employs in her books, because it is so interesting and you do it so well. And when we were having our practice session yesterday, SJ said, at first I was a little worried knowing that this was about sheep, and I think that this is probably I think that this is something that a lot of people on first glance will think maybe is a children's novel, or think that it's cozier than it actually is, when there's a lot of depth, Leonie, to your writing, especially in these 2 books. And so I wanted to ask you how you got into the sheep mindset for this book, unlike Agnes Sharp, where you are writing from a human perspective mostly, and also how you decide to, which information you're deciding to keep from the audience because the sheep don't know it, because we run into a lot of those situations too, where something's happening, but we don't necessarily know what's going on because we're looking at it from the sheep's perspective.
Well, I suppose it's embarrassingly easy for me to get into a sheep frame of mind, which should be worrying. But I know, I think there's a sheep in most people, because there's all these sort of aspects of being part of a group and trying to blend in, but yet sort of having sort of some individual traits one wants to preserve. And I find it quite easy to just think about how's a sheep built, what's their priorities in life. Obviously, food is important. What food do they have? They have a grass meadow. So aside from meadow would be a pleasant thing for a sheep. But at the same time, sort of they're quite vulnerable. They can't really defend themselves well. So safety and food are sort of the main. And then that's not so different from us in a way. So It's just sort of stripping back all the maybe pretenses people have about what their life really is about, and then you look at food and safety and theories about the world. And for me, it's not so much. It doesn't feel like stripping back. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff you can't do. You can't have your investigators make a phone call or, I don't know, go to an exhibition. You're very, very restricted. But that's what I found interesting. I think in a way they're the opposite of Sherlock Holmes or Dee or any sort of skilled investigator. They have basically, they've got like the knowledge of 3 human novels to fall back to, and that's it. And they're little, and they build these little theories and try to succeed against the odds. And I think as a I know I found the sheep thing quite intuitive, and there were a lot of facts that I sort of later checked with I don't know, shepherds and people who knew about sheep, because I did some research parallel, but I sort of started with this is what I want to do with the premises of sheep investigating, and they had to do a few things. They couldn't be stuck on their meadow the whole time. They had to go and go in the village and listen to people, and they had to understand people, and I basically took what they needed to solve the case and no more than that. And since I am writing for human readership, as far as I know, there's certain things that would be too much of a sheepy perspective. For example, I think they don't have much color vision. So, but I still talk about red things and blue things. The sheep are able to distinguish them, and it could have. I think it can easily get too abstract if you take. It's still a anthropomized story about sheep who are a bit like humans but not too much, and it was very important to me that they don't feel like humans in disguise, but sort of as real a sheep as I could make them, because the interesting bit for me is actually that skewed perspective on sort of this outsider view of the human world, and I think it's not so much a strategy. It's just once you sort of strip it down, put yourself there. It's like an empathy thing, and once you're there, it's actually hard to snap out of it. I mean, sometimes I still get that walking past some really delicious green grass and thinking "yum" for a second, and you catch yourself thinking, actually, sheep time's over. But it's easy and it's fun. It's like a mind game. Once you start playing it, it's quite addictive.
I always call back. It was an event we did last year, and I cannot remember who said it. I think it was Cara Black, or it was Camilla Trinchieri. But they said that they had a writing teacher who always recommended that writers take acting classes, because it allows you to like put yourself into your characters, and because it like allows you to suspend your disbelief a little bit more. And it just like always comes up, I think, specifically for things like that, where you're like putting yourself into a mindset.
Yes, it's a sort of thought experiment, and for me, the whole reading experience is very much about empathy. So because if you read, you basically participate in someone else's life in a way that no other medium can do in exactly the same way. So obviously, as a writer, I also want to have fun. So that thought experiment of putting myself into someone else's shoes, or in this case, hooves, is quite essential for me, and sort of that's something I enjoy and as a reader, and I enjoy as a writer, and hopefully my readers will in turn enjoy it as well. But it's very much fun led. It's a hedonistic thing to do for me.
Yeah, and it comes off, I mean, very fun. It comes off very easy. All right, continuing character conversations and a little bit kind of on the other side of the spectrum. SJ, you kind of mentioned that Judge Dee and Lao She were both based on more or less like real people. And there are levels to that, of course. So I wanted to ask you about how you decided to base Judge Dee and Lao She off of these real people, and also what the process was like fictionalizing characters who have such extensive lore behind them.
John, if you take the first half, I'll take the second half.
So the interesting thing about the murder of Mr. Ma is that thematically, a lot of the beats in that story are based on a real Lao She book called Mr. Ma and Son. And the real idea with the book started with the germ that we wanted you to read two books out of this that are, one is Lao She, who is a completely forgotten author in the West. Pearl Buck translated Rickshaw Boy in the 40s and brought it over here. And his entire body of work is meaningful, and he was a very important author, and I want to elevate him. And then secondarily, we reference a book that was written by Bertrand Russell called The Problem of China, which it's very short, it's 140 pages. If anyone reads it, it will give you a very good picture of why Asia and the West have the relationship that they do. And it's not without good reason that there's tension between the US and China. And so that was the impetus behind the series. And then so we picked Lao She very deliberately, as we wanted to bring him back. We recently heard that his granddaughter bought a copy of the book for
well, that's exciting.
We're just thrilled,
Yeah.
It would be a dream for us if people suddenly, like, why doesn't Soho Press republish the Lao She library? So.
Yeah, I had heard when John brought this project to me. It was John's original project, and I had heard of Lao She but not read him. And because we were going to write in his voice, John sent me a bunch of books. I got a couple more, and I read a bunch of his books. The guy was very funny, which I had not known. He was important in the 1920s when he was writing among the modernists of England. He was an important modernist to them, and he was really a very dry, mordantly humorous guy. And he wrote science fiction. He wrote a book called Cat Country, in which a Chinese regular guy sort of hitches a ride on a spaceship which crash lands on Mars, and there he is alone on Mars, and he meets these giant cats. And it's a very kind of bitter, it was written in the 1930s, it's a very bitter takedown of Chinese culture. And but very written in a very plain style. He never says anything is terrible. He just says this is how it is, and how it is among these giant cats on Mars. So of course it's, and I was blown away. And so when we started to work on the books, I had to see if I could reproduce that style, where Lao She, as the narrator, goes about like a journalist telling you what's happening, but what's happening is so weird that you see it through his eyes, and you see it as both weird and something to be dealt with. And he was terrific in his humorous approach to pretty much everything. And
he had a very sad end, and he was murdered during the Cultural Revolution by a mob of zealous
and it might have been Cat Country that really set them off, because it was so clearly an indictment of China. But it also just might be that he was a famous writer, and that was enough to get you killed then.
And one of the other, we happened to pick 1924 as the year we'd start the story, but as we've done all the research, 1924 is like the last pivotal good year before everything that followed, which became inevitable. And
in
so,
China, in China.
oh, actually worldwide, like the Ramsay MacDonald, who was our um, Prime Minister of England during the period of the railway conspiracy, tried to ease the Treaty of Versailles and kind of make things good with Germany again, and he was booted out there. And we're putting a lot of history into these books, and it's 1924 was a pivotal year of the 20th century before World War II, truly.
So that's the beginning. And the first two books are set in 1924. The third one just after, so that we're still in that period, and eventually we'll move it forward.
I have to say, I was really surprised how current it felt in a way. I mean, obviously you've got this London, and people talk a bit in a bit of a different way, but it feels so just still very, very much describes the world, not more than you would wish sometimes.
Yeah, things have not changed that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing that I've seen quite with a lot of the Soho books that we're publishing this year, but and especially Leonie, Big Bad Wool, which was written a few years ago, was written in 2010.
Quite a few,
correct?
Yes.
And it was published in German first, so
yes.
This will be the English translation that's coming out now.
Yeah.
And we talked about Big Bad Wool is about sheep, and it's about farm animals, but you do this very dark thing that kind of goes through all of your novels. And Guru, which was the German title, is no different.
Yeah.
Big Bad Wool is no different.
In fact, it got almost a bit darker than I expected at the time. Yeah. So I was quite surprised how dark it was in the end. But yeah.
And it's another book, I think, like The Railway Conspiracy, that reads very a little close for comfort.
Yes. I mean, especially there's some sort of references to Europe, because Europe is this big thing for the sheep. For them, it was the old shepherd's dream country, and then so they've got this special. For them, it's like the promised land, and the second book then takes them to Europe, and they actually encounter it. It's not quite as rosy, far from it. And I mean, at the time I wrote it, Brexit wasn't a big topic at all. But now you read certain lines and the things people think, sheep think about Europe, and you feel like I've heard this before quite recently, and it has all of a sudden it has a political undercurrent that I was quite surprised by, because I definitely didn't put it in at the time. So the context changes. And,
exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting how it continues to do so. I mean, I wanted to know what it felt like for you, how it feels different publishing Guru, in 2010 versus publishing Big Bad Wool today.
Well, the one thing I already mentioned is that now I've got a much friendlier relationship with the book, because at the time, like, isn't any good, isn't, so there was all that going on. Now looking back, I think I can appreciate playfulness more, because there's a lot of playful and fun stuff going on, so apart from the dark bits. And now it's in a way, it really gave me a chance to rediscover the book, especially since I was quite involved in the translating process, and with my translator Amy, and we really tried to bring it across in a way that feels current, and at the same time picking up all the things that happened in Three Bags Full. And it's just sort of, I didn't realize at the time how much I enjoyed developing the characters, because it was done in quite in a, I felt like sort of I had to do it. But looking back at it, I did this because I wanted to, and I enjoyed it, and seeing the characters sort of develop and unfold a bit. That's something that I didn't expect. I also didn't expect how dark it would feel, and how
It is a good one. Yeah.
Mm.
And sometimes for these events we get authors together who have very not conflicting but very different books, which makes for very interesting conversation. And I find that this one is you all have a lot in common. Your stories are on their faces very bright and comedic, and they're swashbuckling in the case of SJ and John's, and very adventure focused. But they also have these very real through lines that can be dark but are speaking to something very important, which I think is just wonderful to be able to see, like, the bright sunny people behind these books. But we were talking about the timeline a little bit with Judge D and Lao She, and kind of like why you picked 1924. This is a time of change. Obviously, it's a time right before a lot of big change. And yet there is still this like action-packed adventure story while we're going through this like massive turnover in the book. So I just kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about that, and how, especially being like a team of two, how you're able to continue to strike this balance, like you did in The Murder of Mr. Ma as well, between it being very adventureful and funny, so funny, but also really speak to these real kind of dark threads in a really eloquent way.
SJ is bringing the funny, truly. When we approach these, we look at a beginning and end, and then we'll deliver a very detailed outline of main story beats, and then she's like plugging in these gags throughout the story. It's as if the outline becomes this gag delivery mechanism for SJ that we intersperse kung fu into. And then solving the murder. And then in terms of how we split the work, I do the vowels and she does the consonants.
That's a very sensible approach. I was wondering how you do it.
I really read that way. Yeah.
He brings the funny without, with great. The funny, actually, a lot of it comes from Lao She, because he was funny, and he was funny in exactly the kind of ways that I'm trying to be. The actual split is that John does the outline and I do the writing. And then we go back and forth. And every now and then John sends me an email. He says, I have an idea. And I'm like, oh my God, no. But they're always good.
Always time with this.
But they're always such good ideas that if there's any possibility of working them into the book, I do, even though, we're have moved on, because John's ideas, I mean, that's how the series started, from an idea of John's. And when we decided to work together, he already had the outline for Mr. Ma. It included far more things than we could put in Mr. Ma, so we had to take some out. But that's the John knows the history. John knows China. John is about the best read person I've ever met. And so he'll say, let's do this, and how about this guy and the other guy? And we're always sending Wikipedia entries back and forth. John has already cast the movie, in case anybody needs to make a movie. But that's it. It works. It works really well. And I forget the original question, but that's
Well, and I come from the comic book business, and so a lot of the um, this is called, it used to be called Marvel style. They don't make comics this way anymore, but they would work with a plot, and then they would have the penciler adapt the plot into pages, and then they'd put the script on at the end. So the outline that we produce is very similar to a Marvel comic plot. And I, for large scale story, we would produce 500 hours. Like if you read every single Marvel comic, it would take you 500 hours to read it in a year. So we create these plots that then get adapted into the actual books. So it's really an adaptation of a comic book method of storytelling into our story framework, and then SJ converts it to a prose book.
and it works well because the John will say and they escape, and so I can write a funny escape because as long as they escape, it's fine. And so I in the Murder of Mr. Ma, there's one where Dee escapes by swinging on a chandelier and then to a window, and then he can go out the window. Why not? So that, but the darkness, the whole story in Mr. Ma, the beginning of the story has to do with the murder of a guy who was with the uh, Chinese Labor Corps in France in World War I. So already you're in a dark situation. You have people in the war. You have people of whom nobody has heard. There were 160,000 Chinese in France during World War I. Nobody knows this, and they were not allowed. And they were there so that the French and British soldiers could fight. In theory, they were there to do the support stuff, although they found themselves on the front all the time where their contracts said they weren't going to be. But after the war, if they wanted to, they were allowed to stay in France by the French government, but they were not allowed to come to England. And the fact that these six were there in our book is a big deal. So it's already a dark story. And in the as happened here in the U.S. and in England, the welcome for immigrants was not automatic, and immigrants of a different race, it was far from automatic, and that is there. It's a truth. It's an undercurrent, and we didn't want to hit on it too hard, but it really couldn't be written out, and it would be false to write it out. I wouldn't want to do that. So there's that. I have to tell you, in the third book, I am doing it's all it's all I can do not to make a major plot point. The threat to deport immigrants, which was not a major threat in those days. That's not how they did it. But I'm fighting that because that's such a big deal now, and these people are immigrants. So the darkness, it's there. You can use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really speaks to you can't. I think the most effective books have a little bit of both, right? You can't have just like a sour drop of the darkness without a little bit of the comedy. I think it just makes both things hit much harder, and that's certainly what both of these books do very, very well. So yeah, thank you for speaking to that, and I'm excited to get a little sneak peek into the third book. We have already some questions in the chat, but if you have any questions, if you're listening in, now is a great time to put those in there. We've just got a little bit left for our event. I wanted to kind of bring it back to characters, obviously, because these are the on the backs of which these books keep going. And your second book kind of allows you to expand the storylines of characters that you've introduced before, but also introduce new characters. I wanted to ask you if you had a favorite character that you either expand or introduce in your second book, both of you. And if so, who it is.
Mine is Mei Qiang the dog.
Mine too, John.
I'm glad to hear that there'll be a bigger role because I've only just not through yet, and only just had the first encounter, so I was very pleased to see a dog there. Looking forward to more.
Mine, that's a good question. I think, well, I have a tremendous fondness for Lao She, of course, but I also am very fond of Hung. Sergeant Hung. He doesn't really get a bigger role. He doesn't need one. He is who he is all through the books, but I think I kind of know exactly who he is, and I like that. But yeah, we're introducing new characters in the second book, and I think I love them all. What can I say?
I think for me, it's got to be Heathcliff, who in the first book, he's just a lamb, doesn't even, the winter lamb, the little outcast who doesn't really, is not taken serious by anybody, has to fight for his spot at the edge of the flock. And he really comes into his own in this second book and sort of almost conquers his own name and sort of, his individuality, and also walks a line sort of between being a goat and being a sheep, because he's attracted to his other life, the goat lifestyle on the other side of the fence, and sort of now it's a lot about identity and where do I belong, and obviously for him, who is this little outcast, it's a much more important question than for the rest of the flock, who basically know that they're sheep and they've always been there, they've always been in this herd formation, but for him it's really a big question. And then the sort of on the flip side of that, there's the goat Maduk, or I think rather we have a different name in the Aubrey. Sometimes we've changed certain names of translation for all kinds of reasons. So the goat Aubrey, she's a goat who just gave me the opportunity to do all the things that she could in terms of wild speculation and just wild and mad ideas. But at the same, she's like a counterpart. They get together in an interesting way and sort of encourage each other. And having that goat frame of mind was a really fun experience for me, because basically you could do whatever you felt like doing, or like wild philosophical things and just plain idiotic ideas, and you could just try it all out with goats, and then yet discover that there's quite a lot of behind that as well, and their own little creatures and have their own agenda, and there's also a tragic backstory there. But so just in terms of exploring things, that was very fun and quite freeing after a whole novel full of sheep mind to expand into goatishness a bit was very good.
I have to say I loved it because the sheep think the goats are crazy.
Yeah.
And see the goats and what they do, they are crazy.
Yeah.
My first thought was, well, the sheep don't understand the goats, and the goats have their thing, and the sheep have their thing. But the goats are nuts.
Yes, they are absolutely not. But they also, I think it doesn't help that the goats herd used to be a classics teacher who gave them all kinds of idiotic philosophical ideas. So but they're nuts. They're absolutely the sheep try so hard to be logical. I mean, it doesn't always work, but they're really trying, and the goats have given up on that completely. They just go with the flow, and it's great fun to write.
All right. Well, we've got a question from Karen for Estee and John. Do you find the societal restrictions of your chosen period problematic, or do they provide plot and character opportunities that you don't get in modern novels?
I'd say that there weren't overt societal restrictions. I mean, like, so we have an opinion about, and we go into this in the third book. Um, there's an absolutely fascinating fellow from history named Magnus Hirschfeld, who was a sexologist from the early 20th century. And uh, I don't, I don't believe there were societal restrictions in the 20s. We have a historical recollection of that, but people were, there was a wave of hedonism that was caused by the Great War, and real fascinating phenomenon.
Yeah, that's actually true. Oh, but I think that societal restrictions, they you find them in every period. I don't find writing about what people could and couldn't do in the 20s any different from writing about it now. And John is right. They kind of were bursting free in the 20s of ev the restrictions from before the war, but also the privations of the war itself. And it was a time of singing and dancing and having a wonderful time, as much as you could, as much as you could afford. If you, Karen, you mean the uh, discrimination against Asians and against other races and stuff in England, there was that. It's not. It was, again, no worse than it is, or no different in quality from what it is now. So they just go ahead and deal with it. There was a very big class issue in England, but there was the same class issue in China, and nobody saw it as an issue. Everybody just saw it as you needed to negotiate where you were and where you were going, and people like Dee, who could do disguises, could go up and down the class ladder, and and he does occasionally, from Spring Heel Jack to uh, a very, to a snooty aristocrat, and otherwise you just negotiated. So I don't find it, and I'm John is from a comics background. I'm from an architecture background, and in architecture we always say a constraint is important. It's your friend, because if you're free to do absolutely everything all the time, what would you do? But once you get
Comic.
constrained, you can work. I'm sorry,
I do comics.
you do comics. Um, so once you're constrained, you can work within that, with like Leonie does with the sheep. You can only do what a sheep can do. So you
And
can't.
that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Karen, for that question. And then Sue Ellen says, not a question. I'm delighted to find out more about Leonie. I picked up Three Bags Full a number of years ago and thoroughly enjoyed it. I wasn't successful in finding her other books, and I'm glad to see a new book is coming out soon. Thanks, Sue Ellen.
Okay, thank you.
I think we are going to announce the gift card winners, but after you all tell us kind of what is next for you, even though we've all kind of talked about it a little bit. But what are you working on now, even if it's just like thinking about what you're making for dinner tonight?
I don't cook, so I'm not thinking about that.
Perfect.
John and I are working on book 3, which will be called A Warning to the Curious. And it takes place a little later, starts as all the D books do, with a fight, and includes, as the D books do, kung fu, and is centered around the new technology of radio and phonograph, which developed very fast, but in the early 20s was still a curiosity. So that's what we're working on.
Well, dinner's over. It's a bit later than on your side. And I wouldn't be surprised if there might be more sheep in the near future. Let's put it carefully like this. But yeah. Yeah. Just try my hand at sheep herding again, and we'll see what happens.
I'm working on finishing the Slow Horses series, and I'm almost done. And it is the best thing ever. And everyone should read Soho Press's Slow Horses series.
They are fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Shall we announce our gift card winners? We have 3 winners today. First, for the $25 gift card is Catherine Hollum. I am so sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Catherine, we will email you after this to tell you how to redeem your gift card at Mystery to Me. The second winner for a $50 gift card to Mystery to Me is Lisa Mowry. So congratulations, Lisa. Thank you for being here. And our grand prize winner is Brenda Gotti. So congratulations, Brenda, for a $75 gift card to Mystery to Me. Thank you so much for being here, everyone, for supporting our indie bookstore partner. Elizabeth, thank you for keeping us on the internet waves. Thank you. And if you're looking for a pre-order to put in this spring for a book that will make you laugh, but will also speak to you with a lot of substance, we have Railway Conspiracy and Big Bad Wool that are 2 really great options. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Pleasure.
You're all very busy, and we appreciate your time. Thank you all.